Dollar. Dirt and money, no soul. Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack and flip for my foes. Dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar. Let me watch out for my partners. Keep my money long, get my team strong. Let me run away from my problems.
Yup, what's good, original crew, man? We're back. How about that? We back with y'all today, man. We got another Mr. Ballen, the newest Mr. Ballen. They discovered an actual death loop. What the hell we finna get into today, y'all? I have no clue.
Right.
So, with that being said, man, before we get into it, make sure y'all check out the links in the description box.
Down below.
You already know where to go. If you want to further support, all you got to do is check down below. Also, don't you normally say that?
I already said that, man.
Also, if you enjoyed today's video,
Look at him with a thumbs up.
I don't know what I'm thinking about, man. I'm all over the place. We all over the place, baby.
Okay, let's, yeah.
You ready?
Yes.
Let's get it.
Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. And today we're going to look at 3 stories that demonstrate that. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, the next time you're at the Like Button's house and need to use their bathroom, don't use their toilet paper. Instead, use dozens and dozens of quadruple ply paper towels. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. Around 7:20 p.m. on the evening of December 11th, 2002, a police department in a rural English county called Surrey started receiving all these frantic emergency calls. Now, all of these calls were coming from drivers on a heavily trafficked highway called the A3, and they all were saying the same things. They had seen this totally reckless driver with super bright headlights that was weaving in and out of traffic and going at high speeds and nearly crashing into people. And then a couple of the callers said they actually saw this car go down the embankment off the side of the highway, and so it looked like they might have crashed. And so, of course, this police department, after getting all these calls, decided to send out a couple of officers to see what was going on. When the 2 officers got out to the A3 and began patrolling the area on the A3 where all these calls were saying they had seen this reckless driver, they didn't see the driver. They didn't see a wreck on the side of the road. They didn't see any signs of an accident. I mean, there was nothing there. Now, had only one person called in about this wild, reckless driver, at this point, the officers would have chalked this up to a mistake or even a prank. But so many people called in about this one particular reckless driver on the A3 that these 2 officers decided to just keep on looking and really see if they can figure out where this driver went. And so to this point, the 2 police officers had been just driving on the A3 to try to find this driver. And so they decided they would park their vehicle, get out, and walk on foot on the edge of the highway because there were these huge forests that lined either side of the A3. In fact, Surrey, the county in England where this was one of the most heavily forested areas in all of England. And so these forests on either side of the A3 were very dense. You could not see very far into them. And so these officers were thinking that it might be possible that this driver, if they were driving as recklessly as all the callers made it seem like, they could have veered off the highway, gone down the embankment, and then because they were going at such a high speed, they could have crashed their way into one of these forests and basically disappeared from view from the road.
But if he had a wreck, shouldn't y'all be able to see what, like time marks and stuff like that?
I mean, if they never tried to stop and they was just going, I guess.
You still would have seen where, like...
Or maybe
have you ever...
not.
You never drove a car into, like, grass or anything, have you?
Into grass?
Like,
no.
Yeah, you never veered off the road.
No.
So if you veer off the road, you're automatically going to show, like, there's still going to be tire marks that shows where the car goes into the grass.
I get what you're saying.
That in order to see this crash in the forest, you'd have to be basically in the forest. And so these two officers, they pulled over, they got out, and they began walking along the edge of the highway, staring into the forest, looking for a sign of a car wreck. And sure enough, after walking for a while, one of the officers spotted something deep in the woods that looked almost metallic or plastic. Whatever it wasn't supposed to be in the forest. And so the officers made their way into the tree line and began walking through all the trees. And as they got closer, they realized very clearly there was a car. There was a wreck in the forest. And so the two officers, they begin running towards the wreck. They're calling for backup on the radio. They get to this wreck in the middle of the forest, and they're on the driver's side, and they look inside the car, and there's no driver in the driver's seat, but they looked through the car to the passenger side, and they saw the front passenger door was wide open, and on the ground on the other side of the car was very clearly a body. And so the two police officers rushed around the car to get a better look at the body. And when they did, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. It didn't make any sense. Like, what was this? Now, to understand why these police officers were so caught off guard by what they were seeing, we need to go back 5 months to July 16th, 2002. On that night, a 21-year-old man named Christopher Brian Chandler finished up his beer at a pub in West London. And for reference, where this pub was located was about 1 hour north of that stretch of the A3 highway in Surrey where the car was found in the woods. This night, Christopher had gone to this pub with a close friend of his. This was meant to be a fun night out. But, as Chris is finishing up this beer, he began to feel really antsy because it turned out Christopher was actually wanted by police in London for robbery, and so he hated staying in one place for too long. And so the only people who even knew where Christopher was the friend he was with at the bar, and then also Christopher's brother. He knew he was at this particular pub. And so finally, Christopher got so anxious about being in this pub for too long that he told the friend he was with that he just wanted to leave. And so he said goodnight to his friend. The friend stayed at the pub, and Christopher left, got in his car, and began driving south. But Christopher never arrived at the place he was trying to go. He just sort of disappeared, and nobody heard from him again. Christopher's brother eventually would report Christopher missing, but remember, the brother knows Christopher is wanted for robbery, and so Christopher suddenly going on the lam and just disappearing for a while was kind of par for the course, and so the brother really didn't think this was a big deal. And also, the police felt the same way because they know Christopher is trying to elude them, and so it makes sense he would be missing. And so as a result, nobody really followed up on Christopher's missing person report. Everybody just kind of moved on. That is, until 5 months later, when all those drivers began calling into the police in Surrey about seeing this totally reckless driver careening down the A3, who eventually crashed into a ditch. And then those two officers, they went out to that stretch of A3, and sure enough, it was Christopher's car, and the body on the ground was Christopher. However, there was a problem. When the two police officers walked up on Christopher's car and saw it for the first time, they were struck by how old it looked. But it didn't really register with them why that would matter. It just stood out to them that this is a really, really old and rusted up car. But when they went around to look at the body on the ground, Christopher's body, they saw that his body was actually mostly a skeleton, which meant Christopher did not crash and die on this night, December 11th, 2002. Very likely, he crashed and died 5 months earlier, right around the time he disappeared. Now, the Surrey police, they say that this was all just one big coincidence, that the reckless driver that all these drivers were reporting that night on the A3 must have not crashed and actually just kind of got away, and then just by coincidence, when the police were searching that area of the A3 for the reckless driver, they happened upon Chris and his car. But remember, several of the drivers who called in that night about seeing this reckless driver on the A3, they specifically said they saw the car veer off the embankment and crash down below near the tree line. Like, this is a serious crash. Someone needs to get out here with an ambulance because probably someone's hurt. And then when the police got out and searched the exact area where this crash supposedly happened, they find Chris's car that had all the hallmarks of a car that was driving recklessly on the A3 that veered off and crashed into the woods. I mean, they found Chris and his car because of these calls, but it could not have been Chris. But what other car could it have been? As of today, we do not have a good explanation for how this happened, and so it's been dubbed the A3 ghost crash.
That's crazy.
You think it's something like that, though?
I have no clue.
Like he did a video like this before, something very similar, where something happened. Oh, it was that time where like and the woman was down there and saw a shoe or something, and the woman had veered off the embankment.
Yeah.
I can't remember the details, but I remember that. But maybe just something kept showing people so it can be aware that there's a dead, like somebody's deceased and been deceased now. I don't know.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I'm just like
taken back.
Because like you said, if it was like one person that said that they seen this or whatever the case may be, and then it leads them to this, then I'm like, okay, that's a coincidence. But so many people, it's like
somebody
what was that?
Him to be seen.
Be found.
Well, I mean, yeah, to be found. Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know,
That's
man.
crazy.
That's very superstition. There's superstitions, writings on the wall. Don't, bro. But for real though.
For real.
You don't know. You don't know what to believe in.
I don't know what.
Nah, you have an idea. I know you. See.
No, I don't have any ideas.
See, stop the
I
count,
don't.
man.
I
She got an idea in her head.
I do not. If I did, I would say it.
No, you won't.
Yes, I would.
Not all the time.
Sometimes, I read the...
Read the room.
I read the room.
On the morning of August 2nd, 2017, two men sat together laughing inside of a bar in a tiny village in northern France. The men were named Lucien Perrault and Olivier Boudin, and even though there was a massive age difference between them, Lucien was 69 years old and Olivier was 38 years old, the two were totally inseparable, to the point where the people in the village referred to them as father and son. Lucien had spent his whole life working in manufacturing in a nearby city, but just 4 years earlier, he had finally retired and he had moved into a small home inside of this northern French village. But when he had first moved into this new home, he had been very lonely and sad. Lucien was divorced, he struggled with alcohol, and he had had a really tough life, and he just wasn't doing well. But when he met Olivier, his whole life turned around. When the two met, Olivier also was kind of like a down on his luck guy. He was struggling with some health issues that made it hard to work, and so for years he had been bouncing between the nearby city and this village in northern France looking for work, somewhat unsuccessfully. And so when these two happened to connect, it's like they bonded over having kind of difficult lives. And for Lucien, what really mattered to him was Olivier, despite being so much younger than him, did not treat Lucien like he was this dried up, worthless old man. He treated Lucien like a peer. And so together, these two very unlikely best friends began kind of orchestrating their lives around the other. And before long, it was like their lives had all this new structure and routine and meaning to them, because again, the two men got to be together basically all day long. So, on this particular morning, as Olivier and Lucien were together at this bar, they began talking about what they wanted to do that night. And they settled on having a barbecue at Lucien's house. Lucien would cook up some beef, and they would sit out on his back garden patio and just spend the night together. It sounded like a wonderful plan. And in fact, the bartender would say that when Olivier and Lucien finally left the bar that day, that he recalled overhearing them being so excited about this particular barbecue. And so that evening, Olivier and Lucien arrived at Lucien's house, and they went out to the back patio where Lucien had already draped a nice tablecloth over this small round table. It was a red and white checkered patterned tablecloth, and on this table was an open bottle of wine and some cheese and a baguette. And so Olivier, he sat down and began enjoying some wine and bread, and Lucien walked over to the grill and began cooking up the beef. Lucien had a neighbor. We're going to call her Marie because we don't actually know her real name. And Marie's second floor window overlooked Lucien's garden patio where the two men were having this cookout. And so that night, Marie did glance out and saw the two men kind of listening to music and goofing around. And she was used to them spending lots of time together. And she was also used to them staying up late at night. And so she figured, tonight's going to be another one of those nights where these guys are up late, having wine, celebrating, whatever. She was just going to shut the window and try to ignore the noise coming in and just let them do their thing. And so eventually Marie would do that. She would go to bed to the sound of music coming from next door and the sound of men talking. And then the next morning, when Marie got up around 6 a.m., she looked out that window again and frankly was not that shocked at what she saw. Lucien was still just sitting at the table, looking like he could be eating some bread or still drinking wine, and Olivier had clearly passed out on the ground. Now, Marie didn't judge. She knew these two liked to stay up late and drink and do stuff like this, and so she thought, you know what? None of my business. Then, at 9 a.m., so 3 hours after Marie had first woken up, she left her house to go to another neighbor's house to feed their chickens while they were away for the day. As she passed by Lucien's house, she glanced into his back garden patio, and she saw Lucien was still just sitting at the table, and Olivier was still passed out on the ground. It was like they hadn't moved for 3 hours. But again, Marie's thinking, none of my business. And so she just kept on going, went to her neighbor's house, and fed the chickens. But when Marie came back to her...
You think, which one? You think both dead or one dead?
At this point, both.
At this point, both.
But
at the
don't
beginning,
have much
one.
information. At the
beginning, one. What could they have possibly died from? A bad mix-up of...
house 3 hours later, around noon, she looked again into Lucien's backyard, and she saw the two men still had not moved. Lucien is sitting at the table, and Olivier is laying on the ground. And suddenly Marie's thinking, wait a minute, the sun is high in the sky right now. These guys aren't moving. They're going to get heat stroke. We got to do something about this. And so she yelled out to Olivier and Lucien, but she got no response. And so Marie just walked into Lucien's backyard, and as she got closer and closer to the two men, she realized that they were not moving at all. Like, they were not breathing. Something was horribly wrong here. And so Marie, she just turned and ran to another neighbor's house. She told them what was going on, and they got these big pots of water, and they ran back and doused Olivier and Lucien with water, trying to get them to snap out of their drunken stupor. But the two men did not move at all when the water hit them. Clearly, they were dead. The next day, the local prosecutor announced there was going to be an investigation into the two men's deaths, which were being classified as criminal acts. And the prosecutor also said that it seemed like Lucien and Olivier died at the same time, and so most likely this was either a double homicide or a murder-suicide, and the primary theory as to what killed the two men was poison put in their food. And so police sent off the canned beans the two men were eating to this institution in Paris to test it for something called botulism, which is a deadly toxin that will grow inside of canned foods, but it came back negative. And then also police sent off the rest of the food the two men were eating to various other laboratories to be tested for poisons. And again, all of it came back negative. There was nothing that the police could detect in any of the food they ate. And so police were kind of confused for a minute, but then the autopsies came back for Olivier and Lucien, and everything changed. Lucien and Olivier were not murdered. This was not a murder-suicide. They didn't die from botulism or from some poison in their food. They died because of a set of very particular circumstances. Both Lucien and Olivier suffered from non-fatal minor medical issues. Lucien had bad dental health and so was missing a couple of teeth, and Olivier was suffering from a heart condition called cardiomegaly, which means his heart was slightly enlarged and somewhat fragile. However, his condition was totally being monitored by doctors and was under control. But just for a second, on the night of August 2nd, 2017, when Lucien and Olivier were
what the hell? Why you?
I'm just thinking. I'm
thinking.
I'm preparing myself for what he's about to say.
I'm thinking something came across your head, though.
No, I'm preparing myself for
I'm
what he's
like,
about to say.
what you know that I don't know? But you know some stuff I don't know. So I'm thinking, like, you know some shit? Fill me in, shout fill me in. You gonna keep it to yourself?
I'm just preparing myself.
For a second, on the night of August 2nd, 2017, when Lucien and Olivier were having that cookout in Lucien's backyard, their non-fatal minor medical issues suddenly became a really, really big deal. Lucien cooked up a big plate of beef rib. Now, beef rib can be difficult to chew even when you have all your teeth and take your time, but Lucien was missing teeth, and he loved this beef rib so much, he was wolfing it down really quickly, and so he wasn't chewing it enough, and at some point, he swallowed a particularly big unchewed bite, and he began to choke. And when that happened, his best buddy, Olivier, sitting across from him, he stood up to try to help his friend who's basically dying right in front of him. And the stress of this moment caused his heart to seize up, his heart, which is already enlarged and fragile, and he had a heart attack and died. And then Lucien, who now has no one to help him, continued to sit at the table trying to get this beef out of his throat, but he couldn't, and he eventually asphyxiated and died as well, hunched over at the table.
Wow. Damn. I did not see that coming, bruh.
That's crazy.
Fuck.
I mean, of course, at first I didn't.
You probably thought, heart attack when
Yeah. At first, I didn't see it coming like earlier. Of course, I'm like, what could they have? But then when he said the heart problem, and then he missing teeth, they having food, and
I ain't understand the missing teeth part. I was like, what?
That was important. Like,
I'm thinking with the missing teeth. I'm thinking this, right? I'm like missing teeth. I'm like, did something happen within the tooth?
But that wouldn't explain. That explain his issue, but not.
But I
you know what I'm saying?
When he said the heart, I was like, oh, heart attack.
I said something happened to. I was like, something happened to. Which one missing the teeth? The older one, Lucien.
The older, yeah.
Lucien missing the teeth. Olivier. Olivier has the heart. Olivier. My bad. Olivier has the heart issue. I said, oh yeah. When he said that, I said, okay. I see where we're going. I'm just preparing myself to see if that's what I'm thinking. But yeah, that sucks.
Both of them go out tragic. Olivier go out stressed, worried about you.
Trying to help his, friend.
And then Lucien have to watch you die and him suffering, dying as well.
Right.
Damn.
Like knowing, okay, my help has an issue as well, and I'm sitting here.
I need to help him, but I can't help him because I need help my damn self.
That's sad.
And then to lay out for so long, exposed
just like that.
Damn.
The rest of the night, all morning, noon come, just.
That's sad. See, that's a sad way to go out.
That's sad.
Wow, man. R.I.P. to them both, man. Bad way to go out. R.I.P. to Chris too for from the first story.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. To be out there for 5 months.
Yeah.
And not nobody,
Nobody come looking for it. So, well, he's wanted. Maybe he's just on the run and hiding. Whatever.
I'm dead and gone. I'm gone. I ain't even got no body no more.
Got nothing.
A little after 7 a.m. on the morning of April 15th, 2007, 3 men launched a 35-foot white catamaran called the Kaz 2 from a marina in northeastern Australia.
2000 what?
7.
All right, my bad, y'all.
And then the boat was called a Kaz 2.
I ain't gonna do all this.
Kicking off what was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. The captain of the Kaz 2 was 56-year-old Des Batten, and for months he'd been training for this trip. And the 2 friends that Des was bringing with him on this trip were Jim Tunstead, who was 63 years old, and Jim's brother, Peter Tunstead, who was 69 years old. All 3 of the men had spent a lot of time plotting their actual course they'd be going on, which was from this marina on the northeastern side of Australia, up and around the north side, and then down the western coast to Perth, which was their final destination, and where all 3 men lived. In total, this trip was supposed to take 8 weeks, and all 3 men were absolutely giddy with excitement at the prospect of spending an entire 2 months basically just drinking beers and fishing. Now, Des, Jim, and Peter were not the types to blow off responsibility to go party. I mean, they were devoted family men. All of them had been married for 30 plus years. Des had 2 kids, Jim had 4 kids, and Peter had 5 kids. But they were all either retired or nearing retirement, and this trip was going to be kind of a way to celebrate the end of an era. And while all 3 of them had gone on other big sailing trips, this one easily was the biggest one in terms of the distance they were covering and how much prep went into it and how expensive it was. I mean, this was like 10x the scope and scale of any other sailing trip they had done. And so, on April 15th, 2007, shortly after the 3 men had launched their boat and kicked off this big trip, Peter's wife would call him just to see how it was going. And she would say, you know, Peter was in great spirits, and she could hear the other two men laughing in the background, and it sounded like they were about to start fishing and maybe have a couple of beers. And so it seemed very much to Peter's wife like this trip was going as well as it could be so far. And so eventually Peter told his wife that he had to go, he told her he loved her, and then they hung up. Now, Des, who was the captain of the Kaz-2, was adamant about safety being the top concern for this trip. Even though all three men were relatively healthy and had a lot of sailing experience, and even though Des was a member of a volunteer marine rescue group and so literally could be called on to go perform rescues at sea, despite all this experience and know-how, before they kicked off this trip, Des made Jim and Peter go through all these man overboard drills on the Kaz-2 to make sure they knew how to do it if for some reason, you know, an emergency arose out at sea. Right. And so the men got really comfortable using all the life-saving equipment and going over all the procedures. And then also when they charted their course, Des stressed that at no point should they be sailing into open water. They needed to stay close to shore the whole time just because it was safer. And so when Jim began filming a video around 10 a.m. on the day they set sail for this trip, you can clearly see the shore in the background of this video. So they're following the course they had planned. But a couple of hours after Jim had shot that video on the day they left, a woman named Isabel Wheeler, who did not know Des, Jim, or Peter and had never seen the Kaz-2 before, she was fishing in an area called Champagne Bay when she looked out into the water and she saw the Kaz-2, a white 35-foot catamaran, sailing east to west across the horizon. And then at some point, as Isabel was watching this boat, which really meant nothing to her, she just happened to be watching it, she saw it make a quick 90-degree turn and began sailing out towards the open ocean away from the coastline. Now, remember, Isabel knows nothing of this boat or its occupants, and so has no idea that Des, Peter, and Jim had been so clear about at no point will we sail into the open ocean. It's too dangerous. Stay close to shore. She didn't know that. And so she just saw a ship turning and sailing out to the open water, and she thought, okay, whatever. You know, so she didn't go and report what she saw. It was only later on when details emerged about what happened on the Kaz-2 that she would later come forward and say, hey, I saw that boat and this is what they did. The next day, April 16th, two more people would spot the Kaz-2. These were two men who also did not know Des, Peter, Jim. They didn't know Kaz-2. They didn't know Isabel. In fact, these two men didn't know each other. But independently, on this day, they looked out near Champagne Bay and they saw the Kaz-2 sailing east to west in the exact same spot that Isabel had seen it the day before. Now, remember, the Kaz-2 was traveling from that marina on the northeast side of Australia all the way around to Perth. It was a point A to point B trip. There was no reason the Kaz-2 would ever double back and be in the same place 24 hours later, but here we were 24 hours later, and two more people are seeing the Kaz-2 in the same place that Isabel had seen it, and so that made no sense. But again, these two men who saw the Kaz-2, they just saw it and thought nothing of it because they don't know anything about this boat. It wasn't until later that they eventually came forward with what they saw. Then one more day after that, on April 17th, there were these fishermen that were out in their boats a little farther north of Champagne Bay where Isabel and the two other men had seen the Kaz-2 on consecutive days. And these fishermen, they spotted the Kaz-2. And again, these fishermen do not know the Kaz-2. They don't know its occupants. They're just seeing this ship. Except this time, the fishermen, when they saw the Kaz-2, they thought something was wrong because they saw the Kaz-2 from a distance navigating its way fairly close to shore in an area that these fishermen knew was full of coral reefs. It's a very dangerous area to be piloting any ship. In addition, the sail of the Kaz-2 was totally ripped to shreds. And so the fishermen, they're looking at the ship, wondering what they're doing, but the pilot of the ship looked so in control as he's navigating his way through the coral reefs that the fishermen thought, okay, he knows what he's doing, so, you know, leave him alone.
I have nothing.
We have nothing?
I have nothing. I don't have anything. I'm trying to think. I'm like, what were they doing? Okay, they're eating things, catching.
Are you thinking foul play?
They're catching fish. They're drinking beers. I'm like,
Not thinking foul play
Is
at all.
something going on as far as like confusion? Like I'm
What
kind of like
too. Delusion.
Did they ingest something? Did something like by mistake, or like I'm just kind of like going over everything in my head. Like I don't know. So because at first I was thinking, I'm like, okay, well. At first, I really didn't have anything, but then now you're saying you actually can see, like, whoever, like,
That's
you know.
Another thing.
So I'm like, what's happening? I don't know yet.
Or can a boat be set on like an auto course? I don't know. I don't be on boats.
But again, later on, they would report what they saw. It wasn't until the next day, April 18th, so 3 days after Des, Peter, and Jim had set sail, that anybody realized there was an issue with the crew of the Kaz-2. Because on April 18th, a Coast Watch surveillance helicopter was flying over the Great Barrier Reef, and they looked down and they saw the Kaz-2 with its badly damaged sails, piloting all around this very dangerous part of the water to be piloting. And so the crew on board the helicopter attempted to radio down to the Kaz-2 to see if they were okay, but no one from the Kaz-2 called back to the helicopter. And so as they're waiting for a response from the Kaz-2, the helicopter crew is watching the pilot of the Kaz-2 clearly, navigating the boat in between coral reefs. And it seemed like, despite the damage to the sails, he knew what he was doing. And so to the crew on the helicopter, this didn't really look like an emergency, but it seemed like something worth flagging. And so they called the Marine police and said, hey, we have this ship here that's not responding. We think they're okay, but you might want to come take a look. And so the Marine police, they would come out to the area where the helicopter had said they had seen the Kaz-2, and when they got there, the Kaz-2 was gone. At this point, the Marine police got some information about the boat, Kaz-2, and discovered who owned the boat and who was on this trip, so Des, Peter, and Jim, and the police would get in touch with all of their families, and they would all tell police that besides Peter's wife, who talked to Peter on that morning they left, no one had heard from any of the men. They had gone totally silent since that first day. And so when police heard this, they knew this had to be some kind of emergency, and so a search was launched to find the Kaz-2. And 48 hours later, a rescue helicopter that was part of the search was about 80 or so miles off the northeastern coast of Australia when they looked down and they spotted the Kaz-2. And it still had all torn up sails, and it was kind of spinning listlessly in the water. And from the helicopter, they couldn't see anybody on board the ship. It was totally vacant on the deck. Now, at this point, authorities really have no idea what's going on with this boat or its occupants. It was possible that maybe they had been hijacked, and so Des, Peter, and Jim could be held hostage down below, along with the people that took them hostage. Or maybe the boat just got stolen, and Des, Peter, and Jim are not on this boat, and that it's just the criminals on board, and again, they're down below, hidden from view. So authorities, they don't know, but they decided to take a risk and just send somebody down to get on that boat and just see what was going on. So a rescue officer on board the rescue helicopter named Corey Benson was lowered by a rope where he was dropped into the water, and then Corey swam by himself over to the Kaz-2 and he climbed up the side of the boat and he stepped onto the deck, and right away he noticed it was kind of like eerily quiet on board the boat. There was nobody he could see, and there was no sign of any disturbance, minus the sails of the ship being all tattered. And for a second, Corey thought about maybe calling out for Des, Peter, and Jim to see if they were down below and could come up and solve this mystery. But then he also worried that if he called out, there could be some bad people on board this boat, and he didn't want to draw their attention.
Right.
And so Corey was quiet and just began walking towards the front of the boat. And as he did, he began to notice signs that people must have recently been on board this boat doing normal things. Like, for example, there was a fishing rod that was cast out into the water that was anchored to a post on the side of the boat that looked like it had just been operated minutes ago. There was a blue mug of coffee that was just sitting on a table that looked like maybe someone had been drinking from it recently. There was a neatly folded t-shirt on another chair with a set of glasses on them. I mean, there was just all these kind of tells that this was a boat that was being used recently. And when Corey actually got to the front of the boat where the captain would stand, he saw the engine was actually still on. It was idling. And so Corey turned it off. Now, at this point, Corey knew his next step was going down the stairs and opening up the door that led into the cabin down below to see if Des, Peter, and Jim were down there. But he also knew when he went down there, despite there being backup up in the helicopter and more people making their way out here, Corey would be all alone if there were criminals or bad people down there. But this was his job. And so after taking a deep breath, he turned and walked down the few steps, and he got to the door that led to the cabin. He grabbed the handle and he opened it up. And the room he was walking into was kind of like a half living room, half kitchen area. And he saw there was this table, and on it was a newspaper that was dated April 15th. So the day the Cavs set sail. And then on the wall behind the newspaper was a calendar where days had been marked off all the way through April 14th. April 15th was not marked off. But also nearby on a table was a computer that was still plugged in and on and looked very much like someone had just been using it. And also there were plates of food that were out that didn't look that old, that also seemed like people must have just been eating from them. And then also Corey could see past this common area into the bedroom, and very obviously the bunks inside of there had been slept in. And so basically everything seemed like it was where it should be. There was just one problem. Des, Peter, and Jim were not on this ship. There was no sign of where they were. They were just gone. And there was nobody.
Did somebody say they saw the person driving?
They saw someone.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, I ain't saying necessarily him driving, but I'm saying
they saw someone. But and then just what well, this was 48 hours that they came down, but just 48 hours before, the other helicopter had seen them, and then when the other ones came, the fishermen seen them, but then when the helicopter came, they were gone. And then this is the next contact, right? 48 hours later. I'm just trying to figure out like where they could have, they've been on water this entire time.
Could be man overboard, but everything still seems so preserved.
Or did someone at some point get on, take it up? I'm just trying to figure some things out, child.
Were not on this ship. There was no sign of where they were. They were just gone. And there was nobody else on board the ship. It was just completely abandoned with no sign of what happened. Des, Jim, and Peter were never found. And so we have no idea what actually happened to them. Nor do we have any idea why they were seen by Isabel and the two men and the fishermen doing all these weird things, like randomly piloting out towards open water, which totally went against their plan, which was stay close to shore, be safe. Or, why on that second day they were seen in the same spot near Champagne Bay, indicating they had doubled back after going towards open water. That went against their plan, which was point A to point B. Why are they doubling back around? And so, unfortunately, this whole thing is just one big mystery that has yet to be solved.
Fuck.
Wow.
Since...
Nah.
That's crazy.
Nah. You leave us like that?
I'm just so confused.
Nah. I think somebody hijacked this joint. Possibility, because they could have got away. They could have saw, you know what I'm saying? Like, all right. Because obviously they saw somebody driving a boat. Somebody's been on this boat recently. It shows signs of being occupied recently. Is it a possibility? And they wasn't that far away from their initial docking. Peep that. Like 3 hours from, that's when the girl spotted them. And then the plane did a sharp 90-degree turn.
The boat.
I mean, what did I say? The plane? I meant the boat. Did a 90-degree turn. Mm-hmm. So they're not far from where they initially... Somebody could have tailed them and took over it that day. And just been out in that area because they don't... You know what I'm saying?
Okay, where they at?
Man, we out in the sea, bro. Somebody could have went up...
I don't know. Anything's up in the air because they
always
never
say this.
Found
if somebody throw you off board into that ocean, and if they don't go and rescue you immediately, it's a possibility you will never be found.
Because Peter talked to his wife
the day they headed out.
It wasn't until
they
something.
Were spotted.
So I'm thinking like something had to happen
that fast.
That it was like that day because it was never marked off the calendar. They seemed pretty excited. I'm pretty sure they would have kept up with that. I'm just like thinking, but it was food and stuff. Like, I know y'all didn't make that big of a mess just in that, like...
It's been, so on the 15th, I believe somebody came and
But
hijacked.
the 15th was the day that they left out, right?
Yeah, where the area where they were seen was a few hours later.
But for what?
People do crazy criminal shit all day.
Yeah, I know. I'm just talking to myself in my head.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just like...
So I believe they was hijacked somewhere along this line of things. Nobody 100% noticed. So when they did that media sharp 90-degree turn and dipped off, I think that's when whatever happened. And the person has just been in the area for that time. He's been consuming the food. Why y'all? DNA testing to test to see. Can we do DNA swabs to see if anybody else has been on the boat eating? Any other fingerprints on the boat besides theirs? Mm-hmm. We need to check everything. Or because somebody was recently fishing. But like he said, once they had the fishermen saw somebody on the boat. Mm-hmm. And once they were seen, they got out of there fast as hell. And they were gone.
Yeah, because the only thing I'm like, okay, no one else, the other two never like called, spoke with their wives, kids, nothing. Only Peter that day they left. I don't know. It could have been that.
And I don't believe it's three individuals just said, hey, we finna run away and escape and leave out. Nah, nothing. It's two brothers and a friend, all in their 60s. They're not just gonna be, hey, let's go abandon our family and our kids, our wives, our kids, and the rest of our family. That don't make sense at all. Yeah. Hijacking makes high sense. Mm-hmm. But there's no evidence pertaining to a hijacking. Yeah. But also, you remember that one case with the
yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Well, you don't even know what I was gonna say.
I know exactly what you're about to say because that was kind of in my head.
What? Which one?
I know what you're talking about.
No, just say which.
With oh, you could say it.
I'm talking about the actor, the one that had been a child actor. That he was trying to that boat. Yeah. Situation, and they tried to
put that thing and
throw them overboard, tied their feet and throw them over.
Yeah, I remember that.
So
I was thinking about that, but I was like,
could it possibly be one of those cases?
Anything is possible. In a case like this where nothing was solved, no bodies, nothing, it was nothing. Like nothing. You don't have any bodies that were never found. Anything is possible.
You don't have any DNA. You don't have any eyewitness. You don't have no blood. You don't have no signs of strength.
Doesn't really seem like foul play because there was doesn't seem like there was a struggle per se. On the, you don't have much, so you can basically assume anything.
But could it possibly be like? Nah, that won't make sense either because I was gonna say what's the Captain, what's called, where the pirates took over. They took over the ship. But that wouldn't even make sense.
Yeah. I'm sorry, y'all.
But I do feel like foul play happened. Mm-hmm. But whoever took over the ship, I don't think they were solo. Mm-hmm. Because I don't believe you would have been able to no matter who you are, three men, you by yourself, I don't think you would have had that big of an advantage to keep it clean. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But I think if it's multiple people took over, then it could have been more, you know what I'm saying? Like, you could have had, they would have been like, okay, let's just, you know what I'm saying, do whatever they say so we can make it up out of here. Yeah. So, that's the only thing, and I don't believe a hostage situation, unfortunately. I do believe that they're no longer here with us. Would their bodies ever be located? Don't know. Mm-hmm. That's just my feeling about the whole situation. But this is one of those very mystery things where you have no lead to no type of answer at all. No. But the only thing that continuously sticks out to me is somebody was spotted on that boat not long before they went out to try to find.
Yeah, to see what was going on.
Somebody in the boat, they just abandoned the boat like that.
Yeah.
The engine's still going. They dipped.
Yeah.
Or could the rips of the sail be the only signs of altercation had happened? They could have threw somebody into the sail and the sail got ripped or something. That could have been your only evidence of something kind of, there was a tussle or something going on. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like I said, you can go on for days.
This is
like
a good mystery.
I don't have anything. Like, it's a mystery. It's definitely a mystery.
I'm sure somebody will be able to say, hey, 9 times out of 10 this happened.
And I'm pretty sure, like, if you actually, like, go, like and place
dig into
there,
the
like,
evidence.
no, like, okay, and see everything. Like, how's this, like, be there. Like, I'm pretty sure.
I'm sure there's one detective out here
find
could
something,
find
like
something.
Because, you know, it'd be like the oddest things that be out of place or just off or just
DNA
like
something.
not right. Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
There's a DNA print somewhere
and
that
you
y'all
can
just
find
not have
something.
found.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's sad. Very
Sad,
unfortunate
man.
for their families, their children. You know, their
Not
children,
to
their
have
wives.
any answer.
No answers. Yeah.
Hey man, y'all spam us up. Y'all let us know what you might
Please
think happened
do.
about this situation, because this is a very bizarre situation, man.
Yeah.
But as always, y'all know how it go, man. I do go by the name DJ New Kid. This is
You are.
Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack and flip for my folks. Dollar, 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 dollar. Please tell me you can hear me.